Today, the world faces economic instability, potentially more severe than witnessed during the global financial crisis. The coronavirus pandemic is a different kind of shock. Never before have modern economies shut down at the drop of a hat. From 1 week to the next, many workers lost their jobs and paychecks. Restaurants, hotels, and airplanes all emptied. And consumers and businesses now face steep losses in income and potentially widespread bankruptcy. Pressure in the banking system is growing, and higher defaults on debt are imminent. And many now expect a shock to the financial sector similar to in the magnitude of the 2008 crisis. Like the health experts, bank supervisors are responding to a fast-moving and extraordinary situation. The question on the minds of policymakers is how they should prepare for this. The COVID-19 crisis has put the entire banking ecosystem under stress, with the need for personalized digital solutions, a strong capital foundation, and visionary leadership being more important than ever. While a great deal of attention has been given to the impact of COVID-19 on traditional banking institutions, there is also a significant impact being felt in fintech market spaces. This is best evidenced by the slowdown in funding, drops in establishment of new fintech firms, and the reduced revenues of most organizations already in business. In many ways, fintech firms are more vulnerable than their legacy banking counterparts, despite being better positioned for the digital transformation occurring in banking. Unlike traditional banking organizations, the majority of fintech firms have been in existence less than a decade, with few showing operational profitability. The financial analyst Sam Chidoka joins me now via Skype from Lagos Island for more on this discussion. Mr. Chidoka, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the effects of COVID-19 on the global economy. It's something that we've seen. A lot of figures have been put out. We see what even the NESG has come out to say today, saying that the GDP growth rate might dip further to about 4%. Now, what's your projection? What's your outlook? What do you see in all of this?
Well, so if you look at it on a global scale, it's very simple economics. To the extent GDP is the total of all products and services from an economy. Now, what COVID-19 has caused is the fact that economies have been locked down. You've had lockdown. Only essential services have been allowed to operate, but you have to check what percentage of each economy do those essential services amount to. Not a lot. So what has happened is that with the lockdown, to prevent the spread of the virus, it would, of course, have adversely affected the economy of many countries. And so the World Bank projects that there will be a 5% slowdown in global economies. And in sub-Saharan Africa, it might be anything between 5% to 10%. NESG has come out to say 4%. That's not far from what the World Bank has said. But from where we stand, we believe that going forward, the effect of locking down many economies for a whole quarter will begin to show in Q2 and in Q3 GDP figures.
That's good. When we're talking about Q2 and Q3 figures, because even the last inflation figures that came in, clearly it didn't reflect what had happened during the lockdown and all of that. So what are you looking at? Let's start with inflation. What are you projecting even as we move to the coming month? Expecting the figures from MBS.
So we expect that inflation will go up to the extent that that there has to be much activity in the economy in the month under review. If you remember, the last inflation figures, that inflation as an economic index is lagging figure. So it tells you what has happened in the past. And so you will not really be able to factor in the full effect of what has happened. But when the more recent inflation figures come out, it will show where we had a whole month of lockdown, because that's what we experienced, a whole month of lockdown. The effect on that lockdown on our inflation will show fully when MBS releases the next inflation figures. I reckon that those inflation figures will be heading north rather than south.
Let's now look at issues around debt and pressure on the banking system. It's worrisome. I was talking sometime last week, and we were looking at non-performing loans, because we know that even the oil and gas, the banks are exposed to the oil and gas sector and even some more sensitive sectors. What do you think will happen to the banking system this time in Nigeria? Let's focus on Nigeria for that.
So I think that for the banking system, there will be a shock, but I think that the system is well equipped to handle the shock because of some of the things that the central bank has done in recent past, which have steadied the banks, and we do not have so much systemic risks. But to the extent that banks, their responsibility is to give out loans, they're exposed to oil and gas industry, as you've mentioned, but it's beyond oil and gas industry. They're exposed, no industry is left untapped by COVID-19. So whilst we talk about oil and gas because of the fall in price of the commodity, think about aviation, think about hotels and luxury and leisure firms, think about transportation. So think about every other industry that has been adversely affected massively by the lockdown and lock-ins. So what's going to happen is that when people are not making money, they can't service their debt. And once they can't service their debt, those debts will go into non-performing loans. But I think that the Nigerian banks have been proactive. What we hear is that many banks have given moratorium to their clients in terms of up to 3 months moratorium to ensure that those loans do not become non-performing loans. But I believe that with the capital base of most of our banks, I do not think that there will be a systemic shock for what has happened so far. Now, on the long run, if this continues, we will see how it happens with the banks.
Sam, let's talk about the stock market. We've seen the market at the start of this, a number of bleeding globally, and even in Nigeria, we see the figures not looking very, very good at all. Last week, there was a little bit of profit taking and all of that. Now, what do you see? What's your take on the present state of Nigeria's stock exchange, and can we do better?
Well, for the stock exchange, it's going to be a difficult time for the simple reason that if you remember that a good percentage of the investors in our stock market are foreign investors. And what has happened is that with COVID, what happened was flight to safety. People have moved their funds to closer to themselves because survival is the in thing right now. And locally, before people talk about investing, the first thing that you have to consider is your survival. So it's usually disposable income that people invest. So right now, you're battling with a situation where people don't have money to some people don't have money to feed, so investment is out of it for them. Some have lost their jobs, investment is out of it. Some are still working, but not receiving salaries as at when due. So where do they get money to invest? However, there are still some savvy investors who have a deep pocket and who see this as an opportunity to take advantage of some stock that they believe in on the long run. So we talked about the banking industry. If I was investing or advising anybody investing, I would still be looking strongly at the banking industry. Why? The banking industry has an opportunity to take advantage of this situation. Just by digital and virtual, you will have a situation people can still transact business with their banks. So you see that many banks are now pushing to the fore their digital banking applications. So the banks with the good platforms, with the apps that will work, that will allow you to do your transactions, will continue to make money, COVID regardless.
Interestingly there, I'm not looking at this times like this, countries even outside Nigeria are always trying to help their citizens, a form of stimulus packages, interventions, both from the monetary side and the fiscal side. We've seen what's been happening on the private sector side. We see COVID, we see all of them coming up at this time to dole out monies for isolation centers and all of that to provide PPEs for those on the front line of this battle. Now, how well would you say on both sides, how well have they fared in attending or in trying to address this ugly challenge?
So on the private sector side, we have to say kudos to the private sector. The private sector has really rallied. Many of the companies, big companies, the blue chip companies, they've stood and they've been counted. Many of the religious bodies also have stood up to be counted. I mean, we saw in the news just, I think yesterday, that the Catholic Church has given over 400 hospitals to be used by government. So we have to give kudos to the private sector, to the religious bodies, different, not just the Christians, Muslims, everybody is rallying up at this time. However, on the government side, especially on the federal government side, there's just so much the government can do. Remember that the government still has obligations they cannot run away from. And moreover, right now, resources are not at the best position for our government. Our major income earner or revenue earner, which is oil and gas, the price of the commodity has tanked. And not just that the price tanked, there was also a glut in the market. And our cargo was floating on the high seas and looking for who to buy. If we're not selling that cargo, we're not making money. Also, government makes money from taxation. If the people are locked down and transaction is not going on, VAT is not being paid over transactions, if revenue top line for companies are coming down, many companies might make losses, it will reduce tax intakes for government. So government is in a difficult place in terms of finance. But even that which they have, it is surprising to me that in 2020, we're still giving out palliatives by cash. I think that these things provide an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to insist that people, we always banded the figure that there are about 40 million people with bank accounts in Nigeria. Is it time like this when you ought to give people palliative that you insist that people must have bank accounts? Like I mentioned, there are different platforms. Almost every bank have a way that you can download that app and use that app to do your banking transaction, or you do the SMS type banking transaction. So I think that government must begin to rein people in to open bank accounts so that when you do things, I can't imagine us carrying cash all over the country. The chances of pilferage just increases. So I think that on the federal government side, we can do a lot better. Some states are doing well, some states can do better. But there has to be a refining position between trying to do what is right and doing that which is against the law, regardless of what the situation is.
Sam, you just touched on fintech, as in talking about technology, the way to use that to fast track banking, because at the time when there was a lockdown, many couldn't go to the bank, and like you said, online transactions was the in thing. Everybody had to do that. Now, how well would you say banks have also fared in implementing their technological platforms, you know, the SMS platforms, downloading apps? How effective? Many people still complain that they have challenges with regards to this, and how can we get this better? It's a two-in-one question. And finally, you are a financial analyst. What would you advise business people at this time, investors at this time?
So first, on the banking app, I would say that if you're anyone watching me right now and you're having challenges with your banking app, then I think it's the right time for you to switch and perhaps use another bank. There are banking apps that are working. Yes.
Go ahead.
That's the honest truth. Because any bank that can provide a platform right now that people can use in this situation, many can come to your branches. When we were under lockdown, people couldn't come to your branch. If they can't transact their business on your app, then there's a challenge. You must find a bank that has the capacity to make sure that your transactions work. I have a few recommendations. If you ask me, I will do mention names. But also on the part of business people, I think that for any person who is in business and who is an entrepreneur, what you need to do in this period is to survive. This is the year of survival. Every business person, I know I've listened to so many commentaries and so many webinars on how to grow your business even in times of difficulty. Yes, that is true. But you see, the best growth you can have in these times is survival. Is that after all of this is over, your business is still standing. So for a business owner, what I advise you to do is do all that you can to make that business survive. And also for business owners and entrepreneurs, I must say that this period, we are all in what I would call a COVID business school. This is the time that you will learn new things about your business. This is the time you will learn about your expenditure and about your revenue, and you will know how to cut costs and all of that. If you can't learn it in this period, no business school will be able to teach you again.
In one word, Sam, 60 seconds before you go, I'm also worried about this job loss. We see the figures even coming out from the United States. It's worrisome.
Yes. So I hate to sound like bad or bad news, this will happen. It just will happen. The reason why we're hearing one of America is that they have better data than us. People have started losing jobs in Nigeria, of course, but we just don't have the data out there. But what I'll say to people is just be calm. This also will blow over. And as soon as it blows over, once you have the right skill set and the right value, jobs will come looking for you.
Sam, Chidoka, thank you very much for your time. It's really nice talking to you on the show.